Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, how you guys doing? Welcome back to Iftar with Imran. Got the Iftar right here, and this is your brother Imran. So inshallah wa ta'ala, let us begin. If you guys missed yesterday's lesson, you can go to the playlist on this channel, Nasiha Sessions, and click on the playlist titled Iftar with Imran. And there, inshallah ta'ala, you can catch up with all the previous lessons that you might have missed. Brothers and sisters, what are we talking about today? Today we're going to talk about the reality of fasting. We're going to talk about what it really means to fast. We're going to identify which person actually is truly fasting in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants him to fast or her to fast. The reason why this is important is because people think that fasting is merely just leaving off food and drink and intimacy with their spouse. They think that if you're a Muslim and you leave food, drink and intimacy, you're fasting. But it's not as simple as that, brothers and sisters. Because there may be Muslims who are leaving off food and drink and intimacy, yet they are still falling into some things that are causing their fast to be a means of no reward. As the ulama, they say some people, they fast all month and all they acquire is hunger and thirst. They don't get a reward. Why? Because there are certain things that they still fell into that they were not supposed to fall into. So inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to mention to you from Imam Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, from his great book Al-Wabil al-Sayyib, what it actually means to fast. And who is a person that can actually be like, okay, I'm fasting. I just want to mention, who did I say I'm going to mention this from? Imam Ibn al-Qayyim. You're going to see this is a common theme. Sadly, some people are misunderstanding, perhaps due to their ignorance, or maybe they cannot hear. But we always mention the scholars. We don't mention from ourselves. We always mention the scholars who preceded us in time and knowledge and virtue. And even now, whether we talk about aqidah, whether we talk about fiqh, whether we talk about manners, we always mention the scholars, as I'm doing to you right now. Imam Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, what did he say? He mentioned that for a person to truly be fasting, if you look at his speech, he tries to tell you that there are 3 things that the person needs to do. The first thing is that you need to withhold and abstain from some things. Because fasting, it means imsak. Imsak means to withhold. You want to go and eat, but you withhold from it. You want to go and drink, but you withhold from it. You want to go to your spouse and be intimate, but you withhold from it. So there are some things that the person needs to withhold from. That's the first stage. The second stage is that there are things that you need to do. The first thing is things that you don't do, right? The second thing is there are things that you do, okay? And then the third thing he said is that you make sure you stay around good company. You stay around other people who are truly fasting, around good people who are actually fulfilling all of these 3 conditions. So let us look at, inshallah ta'ala, each one of those things individually. The first thing the Shaykh mentioned is that you need to abstain from some things. You need to stay away from some things. Brothers and sisters, what do you stay away from? You stay away from food, you stay away from drink, and you stay away from intimacy. If you fall into these 3 things, your fasting is null and void. There is no fast. Not only do you not receive reward, but you're actually a sinner now as well. Okay, you are actually a sinner. You broke your fast. But then he mentioned it's not just that. You also need to stay away from sins. You also need to stay away from sins. Stay away from music. Stay away from filthy speech. Stay away from lying. Stay away from backbiting. Stay away from spreading, you know, tale-bearing, when people just basically spread these, did you hear what he said? Did you hear what she said? And they spread it. Stay away from, all of these other things. They may not necessarily break your fast, but they decrease the quality of your fast. So now I want to, inshallah ta'ala, give you an analogy. And this analogy will explain to you what your fast looks like if it's lacking these things that I've just mentioned. I want you to imagine a human being. A human being is made up of components. There is the organs. Without the organs, what happens to the human being? Without the vital organs, what happens? The human being will die. If I remove your brain, what happens? You die. If your heart goes, what happens? You die. If your lungs go, you die. Okay? If you lose your vital organs, you die. Now you have limbs, right? You have your arms, you have your legs, you have your fingers. If you lose your arms and your legs, what happens? Do you die? No. But you become disabled. You become crippled. You become incomplete in terms of your physical body. Now your fasting is like that. If you fall into intimacy with your spouse, or you fall into eating food or drinking water, or any drink for that matter, or any food or anything that enters your body and makes its way to your stomach, in other words, if you fall into that, then your fast is broken and destroyed, your fast is dead. That is as if your heart left, your brain left, your lungs left, your heart died, you had heart failure, or brain dead, or you fall into being brain dead or whatever have you, okay? It is the same way the human being will die, your fasting is dead now. Your fasting is dead. But then the Shaykh mentioned you also need to not only stay away from food, drink and intimacy, but you need to stay away from sins of the limbs. Okay, especially the major sins that the people do, like the music that they listen to and this, that and so on and so forth. If you fall into the major sins, your fasting is not dead, but your fasting is crippled. It is as if you lost an arm, it is as if you lost a leg. Your fasting is disabled. Your fasting is crippled. Your fasting is incomplete. As a result of it, you may not receive any reward. Brothers and sisters, you may not receive any reward. So it's important that a person is fasting. He's not just fasting from food and drink and desires, but he's also fasting from sins. And it's crazy that music is from the greatest sins. A sin that the Prophet ﷺ said in Sahih al-Bukhari, that what? He said that a time will come when people try to make it halal. And you've got people who A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, okay, are releasing Islamic music, a'udhu billah, about Ramadan. And they're causing themselves and the people to sin, listening to music, right? It is shocking. It's true. The devils are locked away. But the devils are of two types. The devils from the jinn are the ones who are locked away in Ramadan. Sadly, the devils from the human being, they're still running around. And sadly, you have such, people who are on this devilish satanic path, who are encouraging people to sin even in the month of Ramadan by telling me it's music. Doesn't matter if you may say it's a Ramadan song or Ramadan music. It's music. Music is haram, okay? The same way, you get the point. Inshallah ta'ala, you get the point. So that's the first thing, you need to withhold from some things. Now the second thing is that you need to do some things. You need to do the opposite. You need to withhold from sins, right? So you need to now do good deeds, do acts of worship. So you read Quran, you give sadaqah, you read the night prayer, you do dhikr. If someone comes and sits with you, they only find benefit from you. They only find benefit from you. You have an ayah on your tongue, or a hadith on your tongue, or a statement of the Salaf on your tongue, a qawl of the Sahaba, a statement of the Sahaba, a statement from the scholars, something of benefit to share with people. You have benefit on your tongue, on your mouth that you're sharing with the people, right? So that is how you should be. A person who's doing the opposite of sins, you're doing acts of worship, you're doing acts of obedience. Now, brothers and sisters, if you do these first two things, then a fruit is born. A fruit comes out of your fasting. The same way, if you again take the analogy of fasting and you describe the fasting as a tree. There's a tree that has roots, right? The tree that has roots. If you remove the roots of the tree, what happens? The whole tree comes out. So in other words, if you break your fast by doing the things that I previously mentioned, you have no fasting, right? You have no fasting. So you're fasting if you're staying away from haram and you're staying away from the things that break your fast. But then now that tree, it grows and it has branches, right? If you do the acts of worship, if you do the acts of obedience, for example, you do da'wah, you read Quran, you read tahajjud, you give charity, that tree is not just a tree that's alive, but it's a tree that's growing, it's got branches, okay? But now when a tree has branches, what happens? From those branches come fruits. What are the fruits of fasting? What are the fruits of you staying away from sins and staying away from the things that will break your fast? And at the same time coming with the branches of obedience, coming with the Quran and the Sadaqah. What are the fruits that come as a result of these two things? The fruit is taqwa, piety. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامَ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Allah said the reason that fasting was made obligatory upon you and I is why? So that we can have taqwa. What is taqwa? Inshallah ta'ala, that's a very detailed discussion. And inshallah ta'ala, if you make your way to the Muslim Survival Guide, where we have this new course called Fasting and Furious, which is our Ramadan course, I explain in detail what taqwa means and how to acquire it and what its relationship with Ramadan is and so on and so forth. It's a bit difficult to go into that in a bit of detail right now because we spend a lot of time just discussing it, because that is the very objective and the essence of fasting. Allah said He wants you to fast so you acquire this taqwa. And inshallah ta'ala, right now, we've got an offer that's available only for the 7 full days, okay? And that's that you can access the Muslim Survivor Guide absolutely free, where you can get this fasting course and another few courses that we're launching and all the courses we've previously done. You get it absolutely free, inshallah ta'ala, if you go to the link below, fastingfurious.com. Just put your email there and we'll send you, inshallah ta'ala, details on how you can register. So that will be in detail. But I'll just briefly mention to you what taqwa is right now. Taqwa is basically two things. It's that you stay away from haram and you do what Allah commanded you. When you do these two things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has now ordained you with taqwa. Taqwa means to stay away from haram and to do the commands. When you're fasting, your fasting is incomplete if you don't stay away from haram, or it's broken. And it gets even more complete when you do the obligatory things, or that which you're commanded to do, the good deeds. Now you're a person who has taqwa. So the reason that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted you to fast, which was taqwa, it comes as a result of withholding from sins and the things that break your fast, and doing the opposite of sins, which is acts of obedience. And brothers and sisters, if you don't do this, then you honestly have not benefited from the reason why Allah wanted you to fast. But I've given that issue of taqwa a very brief kind of explanation. Wallahi, it's a lot more detailed than that, and it's a lot more important. I really would urge you to go to the Fasting and Furious program on the link below and benefit from that, inshallah ta'ala, in more detail. So that's the second thing that the Shaykh said, that you do acts of worship. The third thing he said is that you stay away from people who are not righteous. You stay away from bad company. Because, brothers and sisters, the Prophet ﷺ told us and indicated to us in many different places, in many different narrations, that we are influenced by the people that we're with. If you're with good people, they will influence you towards good. If you're with bad people, they will influence you towards bad. Now in Ramadan, you need to stay away from haram and do good. If you're around people who are kuffar, okay, are they going to encourage you to do good or bad? They're going to encourage you to do bad and stay away from good. They're going to talk about kufr, joke about kufr. What are people of bid'ah? Are people of bid'ah going to encourage you to do good? No. They're going to encourage you to do bad. Encourage you to do innovation. What about people who are, maybe they're not kuffar, maybe they don't do bid'ah, but they do sins. Listen to music, talk about girls, do drugs, drink alcohol. It's sad. After Taraweeh, you've got the kids in the park smoking. Being around those people, is that good? No, they're not going to encourage you to do good. And they're going to encourage you to do the things that are going to cause your fast to become nullified. They're going to swear with you. They're going to watch movies and filthy things and whatnot. They're going to actually be a direct reason and a direct obstacle standing in the way of this fast being complete, standing in the way of this fast being a fast by means of which you can earn reward from Allah Azza wa Jal. So brothers and sisters, Imam Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah said, stay away from the bad company. Rather stay with the good company. Stay with who? Stay with the people who are staying away from sins and the things that break your fast. And they are doing the things that cause the fruits of your fasting to be born. For example, obeying Allah. Who are always mentioning Allah on their tongue. Who are also always doing dhikr. Whenever you go to them, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. Trust me, brothers and sisters, I cannot stress you enough. You will find it next to impossible to change if you do not change your environment. Change the people you're with. I take brothers with me sometimes, I take them out of the country, we spend time with them, they change their life, but then they go back into the same estate that they came out of and the same friends that they're with, and they go back into the exact same situation that they were in. So fasting requires you to be around good people. So when you do these three things, brothers and sisters, you can be a person who's called a person who's truly fasting. Stay away from the sins and the things that break your fast, do the obligatory actions and the good acts of worship, and thirdly and finally, stay with good company. The staying with good company is what actually allows you to do the first two. Then you're a person who's fasting, truly how Allah wanted you to fast. And I will just mention to you the statement that Imam Ibn Qayyim says at the end of all of this. What did he mention? He said, this, referring to these three things, this is the fasting which is legislated, not just merely leaving off food and drink. He said the true fasting is the one where the person refrains from sins and the stomach refrains from food and drink. And then look what he said. Look what he said is powerful. Just as the food and drink will actually nullify and kill your fast, he said the sins will nullify, or they will destroy, or they will weaken the fruits and the rewards of your fasting. Remember I told you, Okay? You fall into that which breaks your fast, it's like your fast is dead, like you lost the heart. Fall into sins, it might not be dead, but it's crippled. You may not receive any reward. So, brothers and sisters, now we have to ask ourselves an important question. Where is Imam Ibn al-Qayyim getting this from? It's all well and good that we mention the statement of the scholars, but we've got to mention the evidences that the scholars used to get to this statement, right? Because the evidence is really the key that matters. So you have to get into this habit of always asking yourself, what shaykh did he mention? What evidence did he use? Well, the evidence that Imam Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah is using to communicate this point to us is the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam in Sahih al-Bukhari, where the Prophet said, مَنْ لَمْ يَدَعَ قَوْلَ الزُّورِ وَالْعَمَلَ بِهِ فَلَيْسَ لِلَّهِ حَاجَةٌ فِي أَنْ يَدَعَ طَعَامَهُ وَشَرَابَهُ. That the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said that anyone who does not leave off evil speech, for example, false testimony, and she doesn't leave off evil actions. If you don't leave off these two things, evil speech and evil actions, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no need for you to leave off food and drink. Allah wants you to leave off all of that, in other words, the Prophet is saying. He wants you to leave off food, He wants you to leave off drink, and He wants you to leave off evil speech, and He wants you to leave off evil actions. But if you're not going to leave off evil actions and evil speech, then Allah has no need for you to leave off food and for you to leave off drink. Now that does not mean, brothers and sisters, that you be like, oh, okay, well, I'm a sinner anyway, I'm just gonna eat and drink. No. Because then you've got a bigger problem. A person who at least leaves off food and drink, he doesn't get the sin of not fasting. Okay? But the person who doesn't leave off sins, he doesn't get the sin of not fasting because he's fasting. But he does not get a reward for the fasting. Remember, there's two things that are happening here. There is a sin that will happen if you don't fast. And there is a reward that will happen if you do fast. The person who leaves off food and drink, and he leaves off evil speech and evil actions, will get what? That person will get the reward of fasting and no sin for not fasting. But the one who doesn't leave off food and drink, he will get a sin for not fasting. But he will also get no reward for fasting. The one who leaves off food and drink, but doesn't leave off evil actions and evil speech, he won't get a reward for fasting. But at the same time, he won't get a sin for not fasting. Okay? So it doesn't mean you can just be like, okay, I'm sinning, I'm not going to pray. I'm not going to fast. You better fast. Okay? But the point is that if you want reward to come from your fasting, brothers and sisters, if you truly want to benefit and you want reward to come from your fasting, then please leave off food, leave off drink, and leave off evil speech and actions at the same time. Then you will truly benefit from the fruits of Ramadan, the fruits of fasting. Honestly, you're supposed to change at the end of this month. You're not supposed to be the same. The reason why people don't change is because, like I said to you, they only acquire starvation and thirst, but they don't acquire piety. The piety, the taqwa, it comes from leaving off sins and doing actions that are righteous. Inshallah ta'ala, I really want to at this time urge you, brothers and sisters, to please go to fastingandfurious.com and get access to our new Ramadan course on the Muslim Survival Guide, because there we're going to go into so much detail about the actions of worship that you can do, the Quran, the dua, the charity, the qiyamul layl, the night prayer, the fasting itself. We're going to talk about taqwa, the objective of fasting, the do's and the don'ts, and the secrets of fasting, and the secrets of the month of Ramadan that can really make this a much more epic experience. And like I said to you, inshallah ta'ala, for only 7 full days, it is absolutely free to access. You can access it right now. Just go to the link, leave your email address below, and you're going to get not just this, but another 2 courses we're going to release in Ramadan on tafsir of the Quran, and all the previous courses that are already on there as well. Hopefully, I will see you on the other side. If not, I will see you, inshallah ta'ala. I will see you where? I will see you in Iftar with Imran tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.